for anyone who's watching at home who doesn't know who Design Truth is, if you could give us the elevator pitch of who you are, what Design Truth is, and what the salary guide is as well.
Fair enough. I'll keep it short. So my name's Brad. Design Truth is something that I struggle to explain to people. So, we just go through Christmas and someone, you're talking to a family member at a party and they go, what's work looking like at the minute? And I'm sure every industrial designer up and down the country, as long as, if you're not in a family of designers, and I appreciate some designers are, but it can be a bit of a struggle, right? To go, what am I doing? All this kind of stuff. How do I explain industrial design to someone that's never done a day's work of industrial design? But thankfully for everyone here, I'm not actually a designer. So I've worked in recruitment for about 6-7 years within industrial design. Design Truth per se started off as more of a creative outlet, I would say. So a bit of a distraction from the day to day. In other words, it was a podcast that started, people started to listen to it. I went to my boss at the time and said, this thing's quite interesting. People quite like it. I want to do more of it. They said, no, stick to the day job. And so I turned around to him one day and said, sod your day job, I'm going to quit and start this up as a company. And that really is Design Truth in a bit of a nutshell. And the salary guide forms a part of that in terms of increasing, I suppose, visibility and clarity within industrial design, right? So industrial design as an industry is very cloak and dagger. It's very, protective of its work, and rightly so. There's NDAs and things. I'm sure that's something that you're experiencing, Sam, in your kind of day job as your career kind of forms. But the idea behind Design Truth is to try and give a little bit more insight into the daily life of industrial design, and I think to give the industrial design community a bit more insight into the world that I've operated in for the last 6-7 years, and hopefully that might help the odd industrial designer along the way. And there is a salary guide that makes sure you get paid appropriately, which you should all be getting paid appropriately. So that's the idea behind the guide.
It's a great initiative to be able to have this guide. I mean, I've been in the industry now for 4 or 5 years, and like you said, growing up through university, it's all smoke and mirrors about what industry is actually like.
Yeah.
And you kind of come out into it and you go, all right, scramble to get your first job. And then, accept the terms no matter what and get that first job. And then this guide comes out and you go, hang on, wait a minute. Everyone else is being paid what?
Yeah.
So to give clarity on that is it's really invaluable, I think, for not just new starters, but for people progressing as well.
Yeah, people that are hiring design agents, brands that are using design agencies, and the cost is racking up. That they go, okay, what's the cost difference going to be if I bring in a couple of hires, and what kind of salary should they be at? So there's and for me, it was quite important that this is free. You download it. We're not trying to catch your email so we can send you a vacancy every 5 minutes. So we're not interested in that. So it's like here it is, open source. Use it. You can laugh at it. Whatever you want to do, but it's just there for people to use. We tend to get some quite positive feedback about it. So
I mean, the first one. So this is the second year that you've bought one out. And from what I remember, the first one was downloaded like 10,000 times or some crazy amount of times. What was the figure in the end of that one?
I don't know. It was just over 10K in the year.
Wow, yeah.
Which was, I only know about 9 people. So it's nice, and that people choose to download it. And sometimes I'm scrolling on Discord and things, and you see people talking about it and stuff. So it's nice that people use it as a reference point. But I think what's good about the guide is that it gives a bit of context behind the number, rather than saying you're out of school, you should be earning X. It's some of the questions that you had through on your Instagram. Sometimes salary really isn't that important. It does fluctuate throughout your career when it's of more importance. So it's providing clarity, I suppose, of what you should be thinking about at certain points in your career, why salaries are higher in certain areas of the country, things to consider about your own career. But of course, all of these things are bespoke to your own individual situation. So some will look at that guide and think it's the best thing ever, and others will look at it and go, you know, it's just not relevant to me for whatever reason. So yeah.
Well, that is a big point. This guide specifies not only the seniority of the people of your career, but also the area that you might be living, your experience level, and it puts it all against each other to allow you to cross-reference and see, which it's that context that really helps, because like you said, you can't just list a figure and say this is what you should be earning. There's so many different contexts and inputs that would change that figure. You did mention it just a little bit just now, that we both put on our Instagram stories to ask for some questions. So I think a few of the original questions I got on Instagram were, what is a starting salary in the UK? Which, I'll be honest, that's kind of the whole point of the PDF guide. So I had to
just download the guide,
download the question answered. So I had to just put a little disclaimer afterwards and say, look, read the guide first, go through it, look at the figures, and then come back with any questions. So the next few questions I've got lined up kind of are in that vein. So again, for anyone watching at home now, pause this video, go to the Design Truth website, download the PDF, maybe download the 2021 PDF and compare.
Yeah, it's still on there.
Still on there,
for anyone. Yeah.
Great, so that'd be good to compare. And then come back, play the video again, and then now maybe the questions that you have might be answered. So I think some of these questions were interesting, that it's more of a social dynamic, I think. So this first one, for example, is, how do you know when to ask for a pay rise, and how do you do it? And if so, how often should that happen?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Some of those questions that came through have been rattling in my brain for the last couple of hours, and kind of how do I answer this, and how do I answer this empathetically, and all that kind of stuff. And I think in terms of pay rises, just generally speaking, as a general rule of thumb, it's something I don't think it should be really in the fruition of someone's mind at the front end of their design career. So it shouldn't really be something that's bothering them. What you'll actually notice from the guide is just how competitive, I would say, salaries are at the early stages. You even up and down the country, Sam, there's not a lot of difference between what someone's earning in London and what someone's earning at up in Wales or something like that, particularly when you factor in cost of living, all those kind of other things that we have to think about as our careers develop. So really, salary is just a general rule of thumb. You shouldn't really be thinking about it. It shouldn't be your sole focus at the start of your career. You should really be thinking about, who am I working with? Who can I learn from? The kind of projects that are going to come through the door. What's going to set me up as my career progresses? So that is just as a first point to make. But when you should be thinking about pay rises, I suppose, is probably after a few years in, I would say. So at that point, you've demonstrated a bit more value. You can't just enter a job 2 months in, turn around and go, right, I want a 10k pay rise, because what happens is you get shown the door, maybe not on that day, but it's just not going to end well. It's about timing. And I mean, I don't work in design, but I'll pin it back to the job that I did just for this question. But I've always found the best time to ask for a pay rise is when you feel like you're at your most valuable. So after you've done some really good work for a period of time, I don't know, products hit market and it's done very well from a sales perspective. You've done some really good work. Clients giving you some really, really positive feedback from work. Maybe you've worked with a couple of different clients and they're all saying, God, we've really liked working with Sam. Or, you can get a feel for, now's a good time for me to say, by the way, downloaded this guide. It says I'm, 10% under average salary. I think I've done some good work here for the last couple of months. Could we just have an adult conversation about it? It's all about timing. And I think it doesn't quite answer the question, but you'll know that in your own heart, I think, about your own dynamic of where you're working, the people that you're up against. You might benchmark yourself against them internally and go, okay, this person's got a bit more experience than me, and I get that, but I don't think my output is that much lower than theirs. And so it's all about timing. I would say. But make sure you're not asking every 5 minutes. I would ask once. And if you don't get what you're after, what you want to be getting out of it is, okay, what do I need to do to get that pay rise? And that's when you need to start thinking about, is this the place of work where I can get that pay rise? So what a common trap is around this question, Sam, is people go, okay, well, I'll interview at loads of other places. I'll hand my notice in. And at that point, that's when I know when I'll get a pay rise, because, I've thrown my toys out the pram a little bit, and they'll be, no, don't leave. Here's the money you're after. I would always advise that you sort the stuff out internally before you then externally look for something. So if you don't get that pay rise that you're after, what are the things I need to do? Bullet point, and what are the things I need to be doing to get to that next point? Is it I need to be managing projects, managing people? Is it I need to be presenting more? It depends on obviously the environment that you're in. Are you in agency? Are you in-house? What are the things I need to be doing? And then give it a time frame. So if I do that in the next 6 months, so you're going to, and then in your diary, you're going to have that chat in 6 months' time. And if you don't get it again in that 6 months' time, that's when you should be looking to move on to a new job. So you've set that time frame in your mind of, right, if this doesn't get sorted in the next 6 months, that's when I'm going to say, right, portfolio, get it ready, start working with someone that values me more than my current employer.
And I think, you would hope, or I would hope, that companies that you're part of would have this sort of goal-orientated, companies that I've been in. Every year you sit down and have a meeting and say, what's been good this year? What can I work towards next year? And if that's ingrained in the company structure, great. But if it's not, you're saying that it's perfectly, it's admirable if you take that into your own hands and say, let me have a meeting. And like you said, it's an adult conversation. We're all adults in the room. It's, if a manager is shocked that you want to be talking about salary, it's not that, they pay you. They're the ones paying you the money. It's not like it's going to be a big shock to them. But I think that's
that's why hopefully the guide is of reference, because you can look at it and go, okay, I'm kind of below average here. I'm not for my level of experience. I don't, if you might look at the guide and go, actually, I'm being paid quite well here. So I don't really, I need to, it's the grass is always greener on the other side, right? Actually, I'm in quite a good position here. So I shouldn't really be, forcing my hand a little bit here. But if you look at that guide, you go, actually, I'm 5K under what I think I should be earning here, then do force it into your own hand. But equally, think about the company that you're working for currently. Are you working in a really, really small agency where, the name of the company it tends to be the guy that's on the door, right? So it's named after themselves. It's a team of 3. You're not going to get promoted. This is the job. This is how the business is structured. And so you kind of got to think to yourself, am I really going to get a pay rise here, even if I do force my hand? Because the business I'm at is great. I'm learning a great deal, but it's not something for my career, right? So it really comes down to also the environment that you're currently in. Are you part of a larger team where you can benchmark against others internally? Are you just the sole designer in an organization? It's one of the big eye-openers since starting the podcast. There's lots of comments going, it's great to hear from other designers. I don't work with other designers. I just work. I'm the sole designer. I work with marketing, or maybe we outsource a little bit of our job. So I don't hear from other designers on the day-to-day. And so that's something that for them, it might be a very different conversation, because the person they're reporting into might not also be a designer. So for them, you might have to start going in with a bit more of a facts and figures type exercise, because they might be numbers people. So it's very different. I hope that answers the question, but it really it's bespoke to your own situation, I suppose.
Yeah. And this question isn't from Instagram, but just as we were just chatting just then, have you heard of people that have come back to you and said, hey, I've just pulled up the PDF in a meeting and referenced it, and it's got me some more money? Have you heard of that? Yeah. So that it is.
I have messages that come through. Brad, I've got a salary review coming up. I've used you guys as a reference point. Equally, hiring managers, Brad, we've got salary reviews coming up for our team, for the new financial year, whatever. Just we've given our guys and girls a 10% rise in salaries this year for that reason. So yeah, I probably should send more invoices out, Sam. I think that's for it. But no, we do get messages that come through. Yeah, it's quite nice.
No, and I was reading through the document, and you pick up on, in places like the Midlands, we have an automotive hub. In places like Cambridge, we have a medical hub. Do you find that there are different fields that have maybe a higher wage? Does that correspond? Well, this is a big question, actually. I've added on top of the Instagram question, but
go for it.
For the area of the design that it's in, medical in Cambridge. So is there a boost in wage there because Cambridge has a high living wage, or because medical design in general tends to have more money in it? So two-part question. Of course. What is the sort of area of design that has the highest wage? Mm-hmm. And then does that correspond to the area of the country that it's based in as well?
Yeah, so cost of living does impact on salary, but then obviously you've got to kind of factor that in. You might actually earn 10, 15k less in another part of the country, but actually still taking home more. So it's one of those where salary isn't necessarily the barometer of success, I suppose, in that regard. But to answer your question, yes, there are a few industry spaces where naturally there's just more money pumped into it, so therefore you should be looking for a higher salary, and that doesn't necessarily mean the bigger the company that you work for, the more money that you're likely to earn. But generally speaking, the healthcare space is something that, medical devices is something that does pay extremely well. We're all getting older. It's a pretty lockdown-proof industry space. There's always going to be a customer base for it. And so designers within that world where, there's an incredible amount of regulation and all those different things that happen, surrounding getting a medical device to market, which takes years, naturally, it's going to pay more than other industry spaces. Maybe we'll start to see a shift in that over the coming years. You think about sustainability, for example. Will that become the space where at the minute it might not feel that way, but does sustainability become the market which does pay the most because of the this kind of wartime effort that we're going to have to go through to fix the planet? So it does change, right? It's not to say that the salary is paying more at the minute, it's going to stay like that forever. Think about the oil and gas industry, right? Think about how naturally you would assume that salaries in that space pay incredibly well. I appreciate it's not for everyone's taste, but the oil price drops, and guess what happens? The salaries drop. So it all depends on different factors, and this new world that we might be living in over the next 5 to 10 years will shape that. So hopefully that's not dodged the question, but
that's great. And I think I can already see that shift happening now, where even we're getting this influx of B Corp companies, that the fact that it's a B Corp becomes a pillar of their company and a marketing strategy, and now there's more money because people are looking for that, and that funnels the money into that area. And
sorry, I was going to say the quickest way to get a Dragon's Den investment, based on me watching it last night, was just to say the word sustainable over and over again. It was, they said it 4 times in a sentence. All of a sudden, they gave them 250,000. So it's that maybe that's where that's where the money's clearly going to be going. So therefore, salaries will naturally rise in that area.
Yeah, cool. That's exciting. Cool. The next question I've got. And I remember, because I actually filled out the survey this year. I missed out last year. I didn't get a chance to do it, but I did it this year. And I remember a few boxes saying about any bonuses and any, additional packages to your wage. Do you, from what you saw, have you seen that that's increasing, decreasing, or staying the same?
The only time where, I think there was a question around stock, wasn't there, or equity, or
Yeah.
something along those lines. It will come down to the company that you're, or the types of business that you're wanting to work for, right? So if I give you some example of a client I did a lot of work with a couple of years ago, or even till fairly recently, that's Arrival over in London, when they were called something that's called Charge Cars when they originally started, and you would effectively be talking to designers about a company that at the time didn't have a website, and you'd say, go and meet them. They're honestly, they're doing some really cool things. Just go and see them. And when a salary was put to the table, there's not a fancy pension package or all these things you might take for granted, but they might say, well, let's package that up in terms of cost in another area. So we'll offer you equity or something like that. But of course, when you enter startup world or the tech startup world, that stock is only worth as much as that stock is worth. So it could be worthless. And that's the risk that you take by going into that space. You're not going to get a fancy pension package. You might get a half decent salary, but it could end at any minute. As soon as you don't get that funding, you'd be made redundant effectively. That's how brutal it is, but that's the risk that you take by going into that world. But it only needs to go right once. Where think of those early Tesla employees, they're having a great day, aren't they? So it's just that world. I would say you're more likely to get that stock, equity, those kind of additional benefits that may be on top of that. If you go into a more large corporate structure, you're going to get a fancy pension. You're going to get, all the health insurance and life insurance under the world. Yeah. That's what you'll get. That's part of the job, and you'll have the safety of employment as well, which as lots of people will appreciate over the last 18 months, is something that you take for granted. The economy can go up and down very, very quickly. So yeah, I'd say startup world is where you're more likely to get those additional funky perks, but obviously the equity is only worth as much as the equity is worth.
Yeah, high risk, high reward, but definitely that high risk. Do we want to be betting on the next 12 to 18 months?
If you're single, no mortgage, go for it. What's there to lose? You're still going to be earning a half decent salary. So
cool. Okay, so the next one, we're taking it right back down to the start of the design career. And this person asked, when interviewing for your first design job, what part of the process should you first ask about pay without sounding like that's the one thing you're interested in?
I wouldn't ask about pay for my first design job personally, because it comes back to the fact that you should be looking at, okay, if this company is offering me what I'm after in terms of, I don't know, exposure to product to market, it's in an industry space that you're really passionate about. There's a team here of people that have been doing it for 10, 15 years. I can earn an awful lot from them. They've been in consulting for a while. They've worked for the companies I'd love to work for. I think that's worth more than a couple of thousand here or there. On, let's be honest, it's only ever going to be 5%, 10% below what it is that you're originally wanting. When someone says to me, Brad, I'm after 30k, and someone, and okay, they've offered you 28. Does anyone actually know what the monthly difference is on that to your pay packet? It's minimal. Minimal. And particularly when you start getting into different tax brackets and things like that, it's minimal. You're looking at like £50 a month or something, and it's like, are we really going to squabble over that? I mean, appreciate, wouldn't it be great if they offered 30 in the first place? But just at the earlier points of your design career, unless they're paying nothing, just it shouldn't even be part of your decision making, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, like you said, this guide is here now to give a benchmark. If you're ballpark 10, 15%, or around the figure, then that's all good. I mean, for me, I personally think that companies should, and I always see looking for jobs, it says competitive salary, and like you said, smoke and mirrors. It's all behind veils.
It's difficult. Yeah. I mean, on the adverts that you see on our website, for example, quite a few of them will have a number on there. It's a conversation I probably have every company that I talk to. Not all of them, and I think it's something that maybe as people enter management or they start to become more ingrained in their design career, you'll realise that it is difficult, because let's just give classic case of, okay, you see a job, it's at 35k, and maybe it's internally where you are, just as a hypothetical, and you're earning 31. Your initial thought is, well, I should be earning 35. And let's just say there's 4 or 5 of you in that company. So if everyone asks for an extra £4,000, that's £20,000. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's difficult, right? That's why it says competitive, because all of a sudden you can start to upset the balance of people internally within the business. Mm-hmm. And what if you decided to leave because of it? Or you started to kick up a fuss and the morale within the team changed, and people got upset about it. And that's why there's that area of caution. Mm-hmm. And that's primarily why you see that nervousness about, and obviously as you go up the levels, that range becomes greater. A design manager comes in, you go, God, that person's earning £30,000 more than me, and they're bloody useless. I still have to do their printing for them. And it's like, where's their value? And that's why there is that unease. But I think maybe as a different generation enters management, and maybe that will start to change. I think that will form a big part of the change in our industry. I think is when this generation coming through, generation like yourself, when you start to enter management, when you start to entering business owner, that's when I think you'll start to see a real shift in a number of different things, and pay will be one of them.
Yeah, I'd like to hope so, because I see this on social media, and the demographic of social media currently is relatively young. Teenagers, 20 years old, maybe pushing 30. But on Instagram in particular, the demographic is younger. But like you said, and I do see online, people are calling for transparency and trying to talk about it with their friends a lot more. And like I say, as that group of people moves up the ladder, that's going to be really interesting to see, okay, are they going to start holding their cards closer to their chest, or are they going to keep the transparency going? That's going to be interesting.
Yeah, not to turn the interview on you, but have you noticed that yourself as your career's developed, where if you was to think about Sam as a 19-year-old design student, has your outlook on the world or just the design industry changed as you've been in an office? I know, for good or for worse.
I think it was interesting what you said, because when I was in university, I always thought, and even choosing design as a career path, I always thought money doesn't matter. I want to just do what I love. And, the phrase, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. That was like the thing. So I didn't care that, industrial design gets paid less than engineers, gets paid less than UX, UI. Like, we're renowned for being less well paid. But I was like, I want to do this type of design. I really enjoy it. I'm going to go into it. And now I'm here, and things are, 5 years in, this summer will be 5 years in. I'm starting to think, oh, actually, you know what? A decent salary would be pretty damn good right about now.
Yeah. The rent's going up.
The rent's gone up. Yeah. So I am seeing that shift. And I agree that, with what you said before, don't look at the salary when you first start design. It's about the experience and what you're learning. But I feel like I'm just at that transition point now where it's starting to think like, okay, what's the future of my career now looking like in terms of pay? So yeah, I think I'm following along that trend quite nicely.
Yeah, it tends to happen, right? I think you'll notice, if you actually, when you look at the guide, you'll start to see the ranges becoming wider. And that's because around about, I don't know what happens to a designer, but about probably 3-4 years in, I think you become a lot more assured in your skill set. In terms of, I don't know, a bit more of a safer pair of hands, really. And I think people at that point in their career can become quite moldable to a set, whatever, whether it is medical or whatever. You can become. That's the point where I think businesses want to hire. They don't want to hire people fresh out of school. They don't. They seem to want to hire people when they're a couple of years in. You know, they're pretty assured of themselves. They, you know, they're confident in their design skills. They've got a bit of product to market, but you know, we now want to train them the X way, you know, or whatever. So that salaries do start to level out when you get to that point, and you find that actually a different challenge will happen in maybe in about 10 years' time. Maybe you'll look back at this video in 10 years' time and go, oh, you did tell me this, or whatever. But when you start to enter kind of management or, you know, senior design or whatever, you've got a different challenge on your hands where you're earning X, your lifestyle is X, you know, you've got a bank of experience in X field or a variety of fields or whatever. And so when you're applying for jobs, it's, well, I've got this bank of experience behind me and they're saying that I'm not relevant, and it's like, but how do I retrain to become, you know, it almost like you have to start your career again, you know? So I just thought important to give that context, I suppose, that it's something that doesn't leave you, you know, these kind of quandaries, or it kind of it reaches the surface again when you're a senior designer, principal designer. They've got a bank of experience in toys per se. Everyone just thinks I'm a toy designer. I can't seem to switch field because everyone seems to think that I just design toys for a living, and no company that so yeah, it's just something that will reach the surface again at some point in your career, and can become harder, actually, I would say, to find something. So that's why I think it's really important in the early days of your design career to try and get that variety of experience behind your belt, because it will help you in the long run. And we put it on the guide. Try to start your career at a small design agency. I really would say that is a great place to start your career. You can then go down the different paths, you know, when you see fit. But yeah, don't just stay in one industry, you know, even if you love that field, you know, because in 10, 15 years time, you might just be the toy designer. And let's just say kids stop buying toys, and then all of a sudden it's like, you know, who does anyone want to employ me? You know, that so try and get that variety early on in your career if you can. You know, stay at somewhere for 2 years. Okay, I've done that. I need to go and do something else. I think the best designers I've always dealt with are ones that are they're not always looking for a new job, but they're always looking for what's next for my career, my development. There is it. Okay, now I need to go to do an agency. Now I need to go and do something else. Now I need to be proactive about it and do it now. Now I need to go and do startup. I need to get a better understanding for budgets and P&Ls and all that sort of thing, because I know that will serve me better when I want to become a manager. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
I can't even remember what the question was, but it was super interesting.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know, this idea of job hopping to get different experiences, you know, 20, 30 years ago, once you were at the company, that was it. That was your place. But now, like you say, 2-3 years, if you're happy and enjoying it, great, carry on. But like, what is next, and what can I learn more from? That's the next step. So that's really interesting. The last question that I have, and I have run over a little bit. I am on my lunch break, so don't tell my boss. The last question that I have is, how many people earn more than £10,000 per month? And that made me chuckle. Did anyone? So that's
10,000 per month after tax, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess after tax.
How much is that a year?
I don't know, 150. I don't know what the tax bracket is at that point.
I don't want to know either.
120 and say it's before tax.
How many people over 120 grand? I can't give you a definitive number, but I can say that there are people that do earn.
There are
people out there earn into six figures. I would caveat that by saying, I think if you want to earn those kind of numbers, I think internationally, I think you're more likely to get there. You know, the US, the Far East, for example. You can even earn that, you know, fairly early on in your career over in the Far East. I'll be honest with you, it's not something that's not straight out of school. But I think if you go into, working for a manufacturer, for example, out in China. It's a hard slog. I'm not saying it's an easy gig, but you'll be out there. I've placed people out there that that live in the factory and things like that. It's hard. It's not an easy job, but all of a sudden they go, God, I'm earning a bit of coin here. Yes, it is possible, but I would say probably more internationally than in the UK, unless you're a chief design bigwig at a big corporate company or a tech startup or something, or you're working for our digital cousins. They all seem to be earning 120 grand a year doing UX design, but there we go.
Exactly, yeah. I see them all on Twitter tweeting about, I've only got a 50 grand pay rise this year. Like,
bless them. Yeah, bless them. Just quite quickly, I know you're on your lunch breaks, but I always try to end on a positive, I think, rather than a negative, because in industrial design or just the world, you type in the news and you might think the world's ending, it's all doom and gloom, but there was a stat that came up on our survey or something, which was like 23% of designers have had a pay rise this year, and you're instantly going, oh God, it's the end of the world. No one's being paid higher. And actually, it's more because people have moved jobs and they've taken control of their careers. And so it's just this great example of, like, you can see data off a survey or something. And it's how you interpret that data. And I really do think that although you might look at this salary guy and you think, God, I'm not earning as much as other areas, or I should be earning more. And I feel your pain. But I really do think salaries are going to be going up over the next couple of years, fairly significantly. I'm pretty confident of that. I think a good designer is worth their weight in gold, and the demand is very much outweighing the supply. And I think what tends to happen at that point is that you tend to get a bit of a bump on your salary. So to end this, I would be confident that if you're in the early points of your design career, I know lots of people that follow your kind of the YouTube channel, or perhaps early on they're students or whatever, and I would say is to, just because it's saying that it's 20k now or whatever, doesn't mean it's going to be 20k in 5 years' time, because I think a lot of companies will be looking at design or industrial design, should I say, sorry, as a big kind of part of their business going forward. Some of the biggest companies on the planet are design centric, right? Apple, Logitech, and they make more money than anyone else. So it's there, and I just think that if you're a very, 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 very good designer, opportunity will be there for you over the next couple of years. So don't panic and sign on just yet.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. That's great news.
No worries.
I can't wait for those next 5 years or so then.
Can't we all?
Cool. Well, yeah, thank you very much for all of that insight. I was thinking during this that the tables have turned a little bit, and now it's me interviewing you instead of you doing the podcast. So thanks for giving these insights, and thank you for the design salary guide as a whole, because as a tool for, like you said, people being employed and people doing the employing, it's really, really invaluable.